Because if I won't do it. I won't do it. All right, let's get to the Kings' 2-year plan. We've heard a lot when we talked to Sean Cunningham a couple weeks ago. He referenced the Kings' 2-year plan. And that's basically when what we've discussed as well, not this offseason, but what was it? No, not even next offseason, the offseason after that, the 2027 offseason, where at that point, Zach LaVine would officially be off the books, right? So that's $48 million off the books. A couple other guys would be either 1 year left or off the books. So we've talked about the 2-year plan, and we want to break down the best case scenario for that 2-year plan, right? So 2027, I know we continue to talk about the draft portion of it and how this draft is supposed to look. This draft is supposed to make the 2020, what was that? This draft is supposed to make the 2024 draft look like the 2003 draft. Okay? I don't know if it's going to be that bad, but it's supposed to be pretty dang bad. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and why I keep saying do not waste your time. And you guys, okay, you guys are on the text line. You guys are some sickos, okay?
Yeah,
you guys are some sickos.
Let's ignore those people.
You guys, you know what you're saying about Jaden Daniels' mama. Y'all some sickos. Yeah, that's all I got to say.
I already put someone in timeout on YouTube.
That's all I got to say about that. But 2027, how that draft looks right now, anything can change. But 2027, how that draft looks, something to keep an eye on. I also have a list, right? And the 2-year plan, I think, as we focus on priorities, is knowing what you have with Keegan Murray, putting him in a good situation, putting Keon in a good situation, putting Meek in a good situation, and Maxime Reynaud, right? In that order. Those are your young studs. Am I forgetting anybody? Those are the young studs that you need to essentially be focusing on, right? That's and you can put Devin Carter in there. They keep putting Devin Carter on the trade block. Yeah, so I'm not really including Devin
Carter. Let's put studs in air quotes. They are the young players.
Hopefully your future studs. All right. So throughout the next 2 years, you want to make sure that they are still progressing and growing. This is why Keegan Murray, with arguably the most potential out of that crew, you could argue Maxime, and maybe I'm not going to argue Neek just because he's a little older, but it's probably between Maxime and Keegan Murray, making sure they're in a good spot. That's on the court, right? Now, when things free up, okay, and at that point, Kyle, you have Domantas Sabonis. This is after 2027. So Domantas Sabonis would have 1 year left, which makes it it's an expiring contract. Kyle, stop reading those texts, which is an
it's nasty.
Which is an extremely movable, I wouldn't say extremely, but a much more movable contract because it would be expiring. So that's what happens in 2027 for him. All the other money that would be off the books. Now, obviously, you would have paid some guys, paid Keon, paid Keegan, but you no longer have DeMar DeRozan, and more importantly, Zach LaVine would be off the books. Here are some of the potential free agents. Okay, and I know people are going to laugh about who's available and who's not, and how all these people are going to say no. They're all going to say no, okay? Let's just throw some names out there and see if maybe any of them could be able to be convinced. Maybe they might be connected to Scott Perry in a way. So in 2027, these are 2027 free agents. Steph Curry, all right? His age, 39.3, I think, at that time, right? So Steph Curry would be just straight up unrestricted. Giannis would have a player option, okay? Anthony Davis, player option. Jimmy Butler, unrestricted. Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, player option. Paul George, no. Donovan Mitchell, if you want to pay him that type of money and he opts out of his player option. Because that's the thing. Some of these guys might be opting out because if they continue to ball out, there's more money out there. Even though the initial idea would be, well, why would Donovan Mitchell opt out of $53 million? Well, if somebody's going to pay him $60, then that's exactly why you would do it.
Let's not do 60. If he re-signs with the Cavs, he's in line for that Luka extension, that 5 years, 400. If Cleveland wants to offer it to him, he could absolutely get the $80 million a year.
Sure, but that wouldn't be with anybody else. Pretty much.
But that's why he would opt out of that 53 and then sign for 80 or whatever.
And we're getting a little lower in the salaries here, so maybe I think Karl Anthony Towns, you never know. I think Karl Anthony Towns will probably opt in, but you never know. And Jimmy, please no. Somebody's gonna say, Allen, we'll take Jimmy at 38 years old. He's gonna want $50 more million again. So have fun with that. Anthony Davis, I think. Look, 2 years from now, would you be interested in that? I think that these are conversations that the Kings wouldn't get laughed out of, right? I'm not bringing up Steph or Giannis or anybody like that, but I don't think they get laughed out of a Karl Anthony Towns. You're going to have to pay them, but I don't think they get laughed out of a Karl Anthony Towns conversation. You got a Kawhi. I don't think they, like you said, Kyle, right, with the extension. If they just stay with the Cavs, and that's fine, but Donovan Mitchell, right? Kawhi Leonard would be unrestricted at 36 years old. Zach LaVine, of course. Trae Young, if they don't extend him, Trae Young would be available. James Harden at 37 years old. Brandon Ingram has a player option that he could or could not pick up. Kyrie Irving, Rudy Gobert, Michael Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Drew Holiday. Any of these guys you think, Kyle? Julius Randle strikes me as a guy that the Kings would overpay. He's going to opt out of that 35 mil, take 40 with the Kings.
You're specifically saying they are going to overpay these people in 2 years?
I think that there's probably that Sacramento tax that you're dealing with a little bit for some of these guys, and whether you or not you'd be willing to pay it.
I mean, I guess it depends what situation they're in, right? Because your precursor for talking about free agents is Sabonis, Keegan, Keon. Let's say Nick Clifford turns into a role player. Let's say Maxime Reynaud turns into a role player. You would then have a 2026 first, a 2027 first rounder. So you would have the remnants of a young core. You would still have Sabonis, and then you would say, hey, now we go point guard hunting. Now we go hunting for a starting power forward, like you said. Move Keegan to the 3. I guess if we're specifically using those precursors, then yes, I do think that is a good investment of money, because you're essentially using the money to lock down a position, right? When they got Harrison Barnes back in 2019, it was like, we have Fox, we have Bagley, we have Buddy Hield. Let's get a small forward and we can overpay that small forward in Harrison Barnes just because we already have the other holes filled. Hey, now that's kind of the situation that you would potentially be having them in come 2027.
Now we're getting a little bit lower here. Jeremy Grant still has that player option at 36 million. Well, he's taking that. He will be picking that up.
He will be picking that up, and the Blazers will be buying him out.
Honestly, yeah, Julius Randle, he might at 35.8 million. I don't know, unless it is the Kings just seem like a team that would do that. He might have to opt into it. I know, obviously, these guys are going to talk with their agents, but Jordan Poole, unrestricted. Tyler Herro, unrestricted. Isaiah Hartenstein, unrestricted. DeJounte Murray, unrestricted. Andrew Wiggins, RJ Barrett. There's a connection to Scott Perry. And you have Miles Bridges, DeMar DeRozan. Yeah, DeMar DeRozan officially would come off the books if he ends up staying 2 more years.
Oh, you keep going. I see an Aaron Nesmith as an unrestricted free agent.
Aaron Nesmith. He might. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what to do with that.
Let's not worry about that.
Yeah, come on. Hey, guys, we already talking about Julius Randle. Kyle Kuzma.
Can I interest you in 39-year-old Brooke Lopez?
No. Cam Johnson, Draymond. So now we're getting into the 20s and high teens. But who is the biggest name that is it? Karl Anthony Towns?
I think.
And going from New York, is Karl Anthony Towns the type of person? He was in a small market. Now he gets to New York. He's from out there. he ain't coming to Sacramento, right?
No, I think the biggest name that would hit free agency on this group is Kawhi Leonard. And by the way, I think there's a real chance Kawhi will either have to take a discount with the Clippers or get cashed out one last time at 36 years old. So I think the Clippers are kind of on a 2-year plan as well. So I think him, James Harden, all those guys, I think could be free agents in 2 years. But I think while Kawhi's the biggest name, I think the best player probably is Karl. Maybe Trae Young, depending on how Trae Young's next 2 seasons go.
Well, the other part of this, too, is these teams are in interesting positions where they either extend them or they're in a position where these contracts don't. It might be hard to trade they either extend them or they can't really trade the contract because it's hard to make money work. And that team that they would trade them for would then have to extend a Trae Young, or, that would be the idea because they just gave up whatever they gave up. So it's hard to tell how many of these guys are actually going to hit free agency.
No, and in the modern CBA, very few teams hit free agency because very few teams prioritize creating cap space, right? Most players, we talked about it a little bit earlier, in the post Kevin Durant CBA, they made it so that you'd have to give up like $90 million potentially on a contract to leave in free agency. So what guys do is they just sign the deal, give up that level of control, and then get traded to a team if they want to go. Think, Donovan Mitchell with the Cavaliers as an example.
Yeah.
In years past, he probably would have got hit free agency and signed somewhere else, and Utah was like, we're just going to move him now. But now you're right. Teams don't create cap space, but in this specific scenario, the Kings would be saying, we're specifically not going to extend our Levines, DeRozan's expensive guys and purposefully create cap space to sign somebody.
And therein lies the possible Kings tax that they might have to pay. They also might be one of the only teams that have that type of cap space. So things could work in their realm to where, okay, cool. Like we said, I'm not saying it would be Kawhi, but some of these guys, a Trae Young, might be available and they don't have that many places to choose from. And because of that, they're interested in what the Kings can do and how that would work out. I think, again, if you see a leap from Keegan Murray, if you see certain things, we're looking at a world, and I'm trying to be, even if you hold on to Domantas Sabonis, right? We're looking at a world going into the last season of Domantas Sabonis' contract. So that would be the 2027, 2028 season. So can I interest you in one more season of Domantas Sabonis? You can make a decision at that point in time.
Or
right?
Maybe he signs an extension.
So Domantas Sabonis, hopefully a better version of Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis. At that point, I think Malik would probably be somewhere else, right?
Yeah, Kuminga or no Kuminga.
Dennis Schroeder probably gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, Nick Clifford, Maxime Reynaud.
And 2 draft picks. Because you would have your 2026 first,
right,
presumably in the lottery, or late first round, and your 2027 first round pick.
Then from there, you have money where, hey, you can decide to sign Zach LaVine to a more frugal deal. You can see if you think Trae Young makes sense at that point. He'd be 28 years old. You can see if Brandon Ingram makes sense to you. And you'd be essentially just missing maybe a piece here or there to be, I don't know, I would say a team that's making a little bit of noise. I still don't see a path. Look, unless you go out, maybe that 2026 ends up being the number 1 pick, then you make a different decision. But you're not getting there in 2 years, but it could be a path to just being in the fight and having a respectable team that you have good young talent. And it's just a continuous tweak to where now, all right, Domantas Sabonis is now gone. Now enter maybe Maxime Reynaud. I'm not saying he'll be as good as Domantas Sabonis, or you go get, your Julius Randle, whatever the case is, but you're always around, and it's just kind of a respectable situation. And hopefully you get hot one season. Maybe there's a season with injuries. And I know that might not be the sexiest conversation to have, but it could be along the way where you get a top 5 pick in 2026 and you get whatever you get, in the future drafts or in 2027. And then all of a sudden, hey, we're at least building towards something.
Right. Let's just say it's a late lottery pick too. Like, let's say they end up with the equivalent. I'm not saying it's these names, but like, let's say they end up with like a Jeremy Sohan type player and a Noah Asenge with the Bulls, where it's like, we think Noah Asenge is going to be a really good player, but come free agency 2027, this person's going to be a rookie type of situation. Yeah. So you at least have young players that you can be like, hey, look, we got Sabonis, we got Keegan, who's going to be our starting 3. We've got Keon, who's going to be either a 6th man or a starting 2, depending on what they want to do. And quite frankly, how good Keon plays in 2 years.
Right.
You would have Nick Clifford off the bench. You would have Maxime Reynaud off the bench. You would have the equivalent of Jeremy Sohan coming off the bench. You would have Noah Asenge as a rookie, like maybe has an impact. So, and again, I'm not saying those players specifically. I'm just saying a player like them. Then you would say we just need to fill a max contract 4 and a $25 million point guard, and we'll go from there and see how this thing goes. And maybe by then you'll have a 10 deep lineup. But again, all of that is contingent on how good is Domantas Sabonis if you're ever going to compete. I don't know if that gets you out of the play-in conversation without one of those draft picks hitting or Domantas Sabonis continuing to be an all-NBA center.
I think the reason I say that you're kind of just in the fight is because you are really, what this is if you're not going to fully rebuild, you're basically treading water until you somehow come across a true top 20 player. A true top 20 player. De'Aaron Fox, to me, was kind of fringy in that regard, 15, 20, sure. But a true top 20 player where you can know that that's where your future is headed. And it doesn't seem, it could still be Keegan Murray. I'm not saying it's not going to be, but right now you don't have that. So you're essentially trying to put your best foot forward and not fully tank until that happens. Now, will you be able to do that? I mean, they've essentially, the problem this season was you weren't able to do that, and then you had to sneak into the first round because you didn't have that pick. But the problem is the Kings have just not been able to move away from having nothing to show for it in the season and then outside of the season when it comes to draft. You've had 2 years, or you had the Devin Carter situation, and then right after that, you're able to get Nick Clifford, and we're really excited about him, but he's still the 26th pick in the draft, right? So if you're not going to have playoffs, then you need to be building towards something. And I think this season will start that process as long as they just do what they're supposed to do, right? Look, if you're not going to get to the playoffs, just do what you're supposed to do. Let's get that top 4, top 5 pick, and then at least you can say, all right, we have a real building block, whether you're high on Keegan Murray and what he's going to be able to do in the future or not. When we return, getting back to the present, Hoops Hype has a list of the top 25 point guards in the NBA for next season. Where does Dennis Schroeder fall? Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
Sacramento weather is brought to you by Fidium.